Looking back on that rainy evening, I can't help but remember the mysterious murder case that gripped our small town. It all started on a cold and gloomy night, much like this one. It was a Thursday evening, and I was taking my usual walk around our quiet town. As I passed by the old Johnson house, I noticed a flickering light in one of the windows. I got curious and decided to check it out. Inside the dimly lit house, everything felt eerily quiet, giving me an uneasy feeling. The flickering light led me to the study, where I discovered Mr. Johnson lying on the floor, lifeless with a pool of blood around him. There was a vase on the desk nearby that was stained with blood. I rushed out to call the police. The whole town was shocked. Mr. Johnson was a well-respected man, and no one could understand why anyone would want to harm him. As the police began their investigation, a few people came under suspicion. First, there was Mrs. Johnson, his wife, whom he was divorcing. They had been having a lot of problems, and she had a clear reason to be upset with him. Then there was the gardener, Mr. Thompson, who had been acting strangely lately. Finally, there was Dr. Turner, a new neighbor who had recently moved to town and seemed to be keeping secrets. These were the people that were reported to have seen the victim lately. Detective Anderson took charge of the case and started collecting evidence. It looked like a classic mystery, with each suspect having a good reason to be a suspect. But as Detective Anderson dug deeper, he found some mysterious notes hidden in Mr. Johnson's study. These notes had clues that led to a secret safe in the house. Inside, they found valuable jewels and a letter from Mr. Johnson confessing to stealing money. It seemed that he had been involved in some illegal activities. As the investigation went on, Detective Anderson discovered some surprising news about who might have killed Mr. Johnson. It turned out that it wasn't Mrs. Johnson who did it. She was out of town during the awful incident. People in the town started talking and speculating. There were even stories about a mysterious person seen near the Johnson house on the night of the murder. This added an extra layer of mystery to the already puzzling case. Detective Anderson worked tirelessly, trying to put together all the clues and figure out the alibis of the suspects. Each day brought new surprises and made the whole town more anxious. The rainy weather continued, and an eerie feeling hung in the air. People couldn't shake the sense of that the answers to their perplexing murder were just out of reach. They waited, nervous and eager, for Detective Anderson to reveal the identity of the mysterious killer and bring an end to the captivating mystery that had captured their attention. As days turned into weeks, the small town was consumed by a sense of unease. The mysterious motive behind Mr. Johnson's murder remained a puzzling enigma. People whispered in hushed tones, trading theories about who could have harbored such deep-seated resentment. In the middle of the investigation's toughest moments, Detective Anderson received an important tip from an unexpected source, a person who had seen something strange on the night of the murder. This person lived nearby, just a few houses from the Johnsons, and had noticed a shadowy figure acting strangely near the Johnson house. At first, he was scared to come forward and report what he had seen, but his conscience urged him to share this vital information. With this new lead, Detective Anderson worked even harder. He went back to the place where the murder happened and carefully looked at the area where the mysterious person had been seen. While searching, he found something, a torn piece of fabric. It seemed like it was torn from a unique piece of clothing. The detective wasted no time in having the possible clue examined. Experts in forensics checked the fabric, hoping to find DNA or other things that could help him find the killer. The small town was on edge, eagerly waiting for a breakthrough. As the investigation continued, Detective Anderson started to build a timeline of what happened on that night. He used information from witnesses, phone records, and the new clue that he had found. Each piece of information brought them closer to the truth, giving hope that they would finally solve the mystery of Mr. Johnson's murder. After days of analysis, forensic experts finally delivered their findings to Detective Anderson. The fabric, they determined, belonged to a dark, heavy overcoat. It was an unusual piece of clothing for that time of year, and the experts concluded that it likely belonged to someone who wished to conceal their identity or was prepared for a confrontation. The fabric had been torn during a struggle, leaving behind traces of DNA and fibers that were not consistent with Mr. Johnson's clothing. The discovery pointed to the possibility that the torn fabric had belonged to the killer. Detective Anderson carefully reviewed this information, connecting the dots. The torn overcoat suggested that there had been a physical quarrel on the night of the murder. It was becoming increasingly clear that Mr. Johnson had not died in isolation, but had faced an attacker. Detective Anderson continued his investigations, and a new person, Mr. Daniel Reynolds, entered the picture. He was an old friend of Mr. Johnson, but he had a mysterious side. However, Mr. Reynolds knew a secret that no one else knew about. He was aware that Mr. Johnson had stolen money and jewelry in the past. Mr. Johnson thought of a plan to make the best use of the situation. He wanted to bribe Mr. Johnson, offering to share the stolen riches if they both kept quiet about it. It was a desperate attempt to fix the wrongs of the past and secure his own future. But Mr. Johnson refused the offer. Their argument escalated and things got physical. In a moment of fear and anger, Mr. Reynolds unintentionally harmed Mr. Johnson, causing his tragic death. The revelation about Mr. Reynolds' intentions shocked the small town. It was a complex story of secrets, guilt, and an unsuccessful attempt at bribery. The community struggled to accept that Mr. Johnson, once seen as an honorable man, had been involved in such a troubling situation. Detective Anderson now had a clearer understanding of the case and was determined to bring Mr. Reynolds to justice. The town, burdened by these unexpected revelations, eagerly awaited the final chapter of this perplexing tale, hoping for justice and closure, even though it came at a greater cost.